Hello, Make Idaho Better followers. It's time for another leader interview. Dylan Baker and I are going to talk about some survey results about internet access. Um, and before we get into it, real quick, if you know the drill, I'm going to kind of explain what Make Idaho Better is, what I'm trying to do with it, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation. So, Make Idaho Better is designed to be the easiest way to be a part of solutions to state and local issues. So if you ever feel like you're not being listened to, or people or elected leaders don't really understand you, and that maybe solutions that are designed a certain way don't really have your best interests in mind, I've designed this to be the easiest way for you to basically do something about that. Say what you think, make your voice heard, make a difference. It only takes a couple minutes a week to do that. These surveys are short. And then I share the public results and analysis and try to make sure as many leaders as I can get to listen will listen. Dylan's one of them. If that sounds good to you and you want to do that, click the Do Your Part button at makeidahobetter.com and join the email list. That's how I deliver the surveys and results and analysis. So we're going to be talking about internet access. And basically the challenge in Idaho with internet access, and I'm sure there are many, Dylan will fill us in, but basically a lot of people don't have access either. And they don't have access at all, like they can't buy it, or what they can buy is like satellite, which is slow and really expensive. And there's all these issues with people not being able to access it on a regular basis, and that causes challenges. And so we ask questions about that, and you can click to see the questions exactly how they're posed here. The results are here. We're going to go through this in a minute. And the analysis is here. This is where I do segmentation and kind of dive into what I'm seeing and how kind of if you overlay questions, where some patterns are or not. So this is maybe worth checking out too if you're interested in the topic. And with that said, we're going to talk about, or Dylan's going to talk about himself. Dylan, you want to tell us what you do and why you're interested in this?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Cam. And I'm really glad to be a part of this. So I am the broadband consultant at the Idaho Commission for Libraries. So let me break that down a little bit. The Idaho Commission for Libraries, first of all, is the state agency that supports all libraries throughout Idaho. We used to be the Idaho State Library. We were actually a functioning library. We would check stuff out, but in the recession, whatever that was, a decade or so ago, there was some changes and kind of a refocusing of the mission, and then we changed from being an actual lending library for the public to a library that supports libraries, basically. So that's we're building capacity of the libraries throughout Idaho. So a lot of our role here is providing, professional development, providing resources, and just kind of maintaining a statewide view for libraries in Idaho, advocating them on a statewide basis. And then so the broadband consultant position, that was a new position created here about 2 years ago. When I was first hired here, and the role really is to support libraries with their technology and their broadband connections. We have a variety of consultants that help the libraries, some more general and some more specific areas. And the broadband consultant was really identifying an area of need for libraries to have some support in identifying what kind of technologies they would be interested in, and then also getting funding and resources for their internet access. So anyway, that my role really here is to help libraries identify what opportunities are available to them for internet, and especially as Cam was mentioning, I think it'll be interesting to go through this survey. We have a lot of issues with internet access in Idaho, especially any of the more rural parts of the state. There is just not a lot of good avenues for internet access. The most recent study I've been looking at lately, done by Ookla, which is the company that owns speedtest.net, they in December put forth their nationwide speed test survey for average download speeds for every state, and Idaho came in 47th out of the 50 states. Yeah, for download speeds. So we weren't at the very bottom, but it wasn't that much better beyond that. So anyway, we're really looking for ways to help improve that broadband capacity in Idaho, and we really see libraries as one of the major avenues for doing that, because libraries both is, it's one of the few places often in a community where people can get access to the internet, and also that when libraries get better internet connections, that tends to have a lifts all the boats in the community. It provides access. If they bring in fiber to the library, that means that's usually better access other residents and other businesses can get access to too, if it's already been brought into a community.
Because then it's not that much farther it needs to go to get to them.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I also heard a story from Randy. Randy is the program
supervisor? Yeah,
supervisor.
He works with a lot of our partnerships with other agencies.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, he's who I talked to originally, and he was telling me a story about the importance of internet at some of these rural libraries. There's a guy that lives 70 miles from his closest library, and in order to do all of his online stuff, because he's not totally disconnected, he's got to be able to do those things. He drives 70 miles to go to the library once a week, and he just does all of his online stuff like that. And so that's his lifeline.
Yeah, that we definitely hear lots of stories about that, because in some places we think of, especially here in the Treasure Valley, in Boise and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, no problem. People have smartphones, people have at least a couple different residential internet options. But in rural Idaho, it's like you're lucky to get good cell service, let alone have any kind of residential internet. So
there was a comment in the survey that said basically there's, I can access the internet via cell service, but only in town.
Right.
Maybe I go 2 blocks to the left or the right, and I can't do it. So that's worth mentioning, is that this isn't the world that I live in. So, my analysis, my perspective, I can kind of funnel what I've learned through this survey, but this is really foreign to me, the concept of not having access in a rural setting, and we'll talk about the questions, but I use the internet constantly, and I get stressed out if I don't have my phone on me or something for 30 minutes maybe.
Me too. Yeah.
So
absolutely. I could totally relate to that. Yeah, these questions, I was thinking as I was looking through them, I was like, oh yeah, I'm one of those constant, I feel anxiety without being.
We're I don't know if you consider yourself a digital native, but I feel like that term applies to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely relate to that term.
Yeah. Okay. It is also worth mentioning, since we're talking internet, if you can't get enough of Dylan Baker's hot takes and everything, check out his Twitter. He has a lot more tweets than I do. And I just found out that he's into fantasy board games and sci-fi, so we would be best friends, I'm pretty sure. So,
oh, good.
So yeah, we should probably hang out and play Settlers of Catan or something.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I love board games, any kind of games, you bet. Yeah. And I think the only reason I have more tweets than you is just because I signed up for Twitter a long time ago, but I am not a very prolific tweeter, so.
Okay, only last one was over a week ago, so
yeah, exactly.
I'm more frequent.
They're pretty sporadic.
Okay, well, let's get into it.
Perfect.
So I'll set the stage a little bit as I was kind of thinking about the survey questions and how I designed them, and with you guys is, Randy was mentioning that when we were talking, what would be helpful to learn more about for the libraries, he was talking about how he was concerned about the census, actually. So this was kind of his, he was like, the 2020 census, when it happens, is going to have a lot to do with what we learn about these different communities, and also how we can allocate resources. So, and since there's a big online component, maybe it's all online. I don't know. You'll have to tell me. But
I believe it is going to be all online. That
okay.
is the initial focus. Yeah.
So there's real concern about participation in areas where there's not good internet access, and if there's not good participation, that's going to make it hard to help those communities. So it's kind of like twofold. What's the access in these different places, for one, and then, a follow-on question will be, how do we try to increase participation in the census, from what we learn.
Right.
So that was kind of, not all the questions were related to that, but that was kind of what got my mind turning on why we should have an internet access survey, so that I thought, well, maybe one of the easiest ways to get data on this is to ask kind of locals how many people can access the internet where they live in their counties.
Yeah.
So this isn't a high tech way to get this data per se, but this is basically what locals are saying about their communities.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's great. You got to start somewhere, and it's hard to get that kind of data about internet usage, especially. Right. Yeah, and it's become such a focus. I mean, I was just reading the article the other day. I mean, the governor setting up the broadband task force. Yeah, I mean, it's getting that information about who has access and what kind of access. It's just critical. So
And there's some gaps right now, right? It's not as good as maybe people would expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, outside of the cities and what people, I mean, as you were alluding to, a lot of places, it's like, wow, they've got maybe satellite service, and that's not great, and that is expensive. Yeah. So I think this was really interesting to see what perceptions people have about their neighbors and other counties, and what kind of access other people have. Yeah, it was just an interesting lens. Yeah.
Yeah, and to reiterate, these were people that have access to the internet that responded to this survey, and they basically kind of reflected on how important they think about it, and kind of what access is like where they live. But we didn't really hear from people that don't have internet access. Part of the reason is it takes way more resources to reach those people. And Make Idaho Better doesn't have those resources. So this is the best we could do. So this is like helping out, but we weren't able to include anybody in an offline format.
Right.
Okay, well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
First question, for context, I wanted to know how often each respondent normally uses the internet. Anywhere from constantly to a few times a day to less than once a month. And virtually everyone said basically daily, with most saying constantly.
Right.
Was that surprising at all to you?
No, I mean, I think it totally made sense. I think given again that, like you said, this survey was an entirely online based survey, and maybe also the people that are going to be most engaged with taking an online survey are going to be the people who are online all the time. That definitely made sense to me. But I feel like if we're being realistic too, most people are going to find themselves online. I mean, just with the prevalence of smartphones, and just how many of our activities are totally just like online based, even things you just don't think about anymore. I mean, you have a smartphone, how often do you actually make calls with it? How much more is it used for internet? Even if it's just the sheer fact of using a messaging app to message somebody, rather than make a phone call. So yeah, I thought that those results just really confirmed exactly what I was kind of thinking.
Okay, so this is kind of what you expected. Yeah, along those lines, like, I don't even, phone, like, in terms of technology, there's like voice calling, there's like SMS, and then there's all this data usage.
Right.
I hardly even use SMS anymore. I'm pretty much using like Facebook Messenger for, I don't know, 80+% of my like texting, messaging. So
yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was a little surprised by this because I don't
Mhm.
know. It doesn't show in these results, but in the analysis, I showed kind of the demographic breakdown,
Mhm.
how we had pretty even representation across age groups. Um, we had more 50 people in their 50s and 60s actually than people in their 20s. So I thought maybe we'd see more people that are like, I
Yeah.
check it, in the evening, in the morning,
Mhm.
or in the evening, or every couple days to stay up with my email. But like, no, this is across all these age groups, pretty much constant. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that was I do admit, like your analysis, that was a little interesting too. Like you said, across age groups, it was definitely these
yeah,
people are tapped into the internet. So
right. And here is that age group breakdown. So it's over 60% in every category were constant. You did see a little more in these like old 50s,
mhm.
50 plus, higher percentage saying a few times a day, not constantly, but still most of them were constant. So yeah. Okay. Um, okay, this view isn't that
Mm,
I don't love this view, but we can I broke it down in my analysis so we could
yeah.
pull that up too. Is I wanted to know for each respondent. Originally, I was just like thinking how can you access the internet, yes or no? But then I realized it's probably more important to ask the different ways because perhaps the access issues might not be across all the different ways. It might be possible via your phone, but if you're only using phone,
Mm.
that's really expensive. And how are you going to watch Game of Thrones without spending hundreds of dollars? So yeah, and you're really not watching Game of Thrones if you're on satellite. But
Yeah. Mm,
um, so yeah, so I asked this, and basically this overall view kind of shows of our respondents, virtually everybody could do it at home on the phone or in a public place, but not as many for work or school.
right.
Um, and yeah, let me just pull that up here.
Yeah.
So this is the nicer view, I think, like yes versus no for each of these categories across the board. And it was definitely less for work or school.
Mhm.
Did that strike you in any way?
It did. I did. I mean, I had to kind of think about that with and reading through your analysis. It took me a little bit, but I think you noted, I would kind of agree with that. Maybe some of those people are just people who aren't working or in school, so
Yeah,
they would just say, "No, I don't, because I'm not in work or school."
yeah,
Um, but I think, I mean, most of the other ones, it yeah, it was interesting. And it would be interesting to see slicing and dicing that a little bit. Like for the slight slivers that people said that they couldn't do it at home or on a phone. I mean, are they relying entirely on a public place or on a work or school?
yeah. Excuse me. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
There was some interesting, like how those slivers, but it seemed to me overall, I think, like as you pulled out in that analysis, most people could access it at home, on a phone, and at a public place.
Yeah, definitely out of these folks.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then here kind of took it another step deeper, which is basically like the two previous questions we asked, like how often do you use internet, and then
Hmm.
can you use it these ways? So then how often do you use it each of these ways now?
Right.
Definitely saw the most usage. This weighted average shows just kind of um, cross everybody how these compared. So at home was used most frequently, then a phone, then at work or school, then a public place. What did anything was this interesting at all to you?
I did think it was a little
Confirmed what you
interesting.
thought, maybe?
Yeah, just the way that the people. I mean, there was a little less. I mean, I guess seeing that not as much in the people using it at a public place. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that kind of makes sense, I think, too. If you think about it, if people have access at home, or on phone or work or school, then they're not, and the people responding to the survey may not be the people who feel the need to then seek out a public place to go use the internet. Maybe they're going to the
Right,
public space for other reasons. Um,
right,
they're at the public space to check out books or attend a story time if it's a library, or
right.
they're at the coffee shop actually to drink coffee or meet people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So I could definitely see that with the maybe the people that responded here
Yeah,
were people who already had access
right.
individually.
Yeah, and this was kind of the view where I tried to get at that, where
Mhm.
kind of showed the proportions of how often they use it. So,
Right.
like some little more than 10 never use internet in public places, but the biggest group for public places was monthly.
Yeah.
What did I call that? Monthly or less.
Less. Yeah.
Um, so that makes sense to me. Like, you know, maybe when you go to the library, a lot of folks don't just go there to hang out and like, boot up and do work.
Right.
Maybe they're getting books or movies or other content. And then if you go to a coffee shop, maybe you're meeting a friend and not just working there all the time.
Right.
So it kind of made sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I would argue that the kind of people that do depend heavily on the library or the coffee shop for internet, I mean they're the ones I think who may not be well representative in this
In this,
survey.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're
this
totally right.
particular one. So I
Yeah,
think that libraries do find there are a lot of people that do depend heavily on the library or a coffee shop for their sole or primary source of internet, but I don't think we're going to just see them here.
right. So I think this next one
Yeah,
is this is the gold for or silver or bronze. I don't know what it is, but it's something for you all. So
absolutely.
this question was, so how many people in your county would you guess are not accessing the internet these different ways?
Mhm.
So people definitely said, well, the bigger bar means they're not accessing it, right? I think so.
Mm.
Uh, because the
Oh, right.
because at home,
Weighted.
so I think the bigger bar means less people are accessing it. So more people are accessing it than via phone than they are at home
Yeah.
in their county. Actually, that view is confusing me. Let's do this one. So um, this one is also weird looking.
Hmm.
So the yellow is saying how many people said people are not accessing the internet at home,
Hmm.
in a large amount. The blue is
Right.
saying only a few people aren't accessing it that way where I live. Um, so um, honestly, these views kind of confused me. So that the I wanted to map it out, and I used the home one for the
Yeah.
map because to me that's the one that really you want more people to have because
Right.
that's when you can do real research and you can kind of like maybe do it like get a college degree or
Yeah.
apply for jobs or all those kinds of things that are good for the economy. Um, so so this is what I did. I averaged out what everybody said for internet access at home and pulled it apart by which county they responded from.
Hmm.
Um, and I showed here kind of how many responses we got from each county. So I think this is really important to keep in mind
Yeah.
because maybe we have a good read from Ada County with 170
Sure.
responses,
Right.
but Owyhee, which is the most read,
Yeah.
which is like saying basically the maximum number of people aren't accessing. We only heard from one person in that county.
Yeah. I really liked your analysis on this one. It made a lot more sense to me looking at once you put it into the map view and then seeing the number of responses per county and then the number and then those percentages. That I think you really hit the heart of that question. I felt like with that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I feel like we could probably talk about this chart for a long time, but do you were there surprises here? Do you think that some of these, let's say Idaho County, we heard from
Hmm.
8 people. Do you think do you put much weight into this like 24% average that the residents from Idaho County
Right.
kind of estimated? Like, do you think there's much value in this for you from your professional?
I do. I think as a good starting point, I think it really illustrates what especially those counties where you got at least a few responses from, um, that people are aware that the there are people at home without internet access.
Hmm.
That it's a challenge. You know, um, seeing like, yeah, Boise County, I guess you had 4 people, 24%. Idaho County, 8 people, 24%. Bonner, 27%. And that's 10 people. These are all parts of the state that I definitely have heard like their home residential internet options are limited in terms of who provides it, where it's available, what speeds are available. Yeah, I think a lot of these were. I think it's just a good starting point to be kind of aware of.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was. I thought it was really interesting with Ada that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Ada because you live
Yeah.
in Ada County.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So. Um,
Okay.
and since that was the greatest percentage of responses and probably the most representative, the fact that that still came out as 17%, I thought that was really interesting because I feel like Ada's got to be one of
You
the
would have thought
best.
lower.
Yeah, I just would have expected that people have a lot more connectivity options here in Ada County, but then again, there are other challenges. Even in Ada County, usually you just have a couple of different choices for any kind of residential internet. I mean, here in Boise, it's like CenturyLink or Cable One. That's it.
Right.
And
Yeah, I think the wording of the question really matters there. Like
right,
so I said, I intentionally left it a little
yeah,
open. So I said, are not accessing. I didn't say like could not access.
right,
So I think that would have been different. Maybe I should have done that too. But because I'm guessing most people in Ada County, there are options. There's plenty of options.
yes,
It's more if you don't access it, it's more by choice potentially.
right.
Um, and
And I could see
so
that. I mean, anecdotally, I've heard, a number of people that, it's like, well, they have smartphones and they have internet on their smartphones, and that's good enough. They don't need to go and do the
they're not
residential internet.
streaming and
Yeah, exactly. They're relying on traditional cable or satellite service for their TV, so they'll just do all the internet on their phone, or they'll piggyback off of someone else's Wi-Fi or whatever. Um, so I could definitely see that in Nada County is that like how you worded that question is people could be like yeah, there are people that just choose not to have home internet access for whatever reason because they have other options.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I actually, my wife and I were talking about this when I designed the survey. I was like, "Yeah, what's your guess?"
yeah.
She works at the Osher
Oh
Lifelong
yeah.
Learning Institute. Yeah, so she works with a lot of retirees, and I was like, "Well, I think I would put it somewhere. I think the national average is like 10% not accessing or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that right? The national
That that
average."
that sounds about right. I haven't looked at it lately, but yeah.
So I was like, well, I would probably put Boise at about 10% then. And she was like, really? I'd say higher. And I was like, oh, really? So, so she was more
She was probably,
better
yeah.
instinct than I did, I think.
Me as well. Yeah.
Um, okay, well, let's kind of move on these next ones.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one that's kind of like,
Mm,
well, it says how much would it change your life if you didn't have access to internet? And this is really, I think, where kind of getting into the, like I mentioned, anxiety of not having access comes
right.
in. So I was definitely a great deal. My life would change a great deal if I didn't have
Yeah.
access to the internet.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I think, people, it's like, I mean, maybe not everyone feels like a great deal, but I do feel like so many of our just basic services these days are pretty much primarily internet. I mean, you talk
Yeah,
banking, you talk, even healthcare, um,
true. Just to
any
do the things that you have to do for your own health.
right, things that traditionally were like, oh, well, you go to the place or you call them up or you send them a piece of mail and you send them a letter. It's just so many things we're used to doing online. I feel like if people were being honest with themselves, at the very least, it's a lot, if not a great deal. Just but maybe people don't think about those kind of like, you just take for granted the banking and the, or shopping stuff online, or the healthcare, getting those questions answered, or
Mm-hmm.
even just connecting with, far-flung family members or friends.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think of that necessarily as the internet access. It's just it's like the electricity in your house. I kind of think that way.
Yes, I
People
totally agree with
don't
that.
think about the backbone of the internet powering all those things.
Right.
So I thought
Yeah,
that was
there were a lot of
yeah,
comments that kind of mentioned that, like, that this should be considered more like a public utility than a
yeah,
like nice to have convenient thing.
right. And I think that's why we're seeing, more and more. I mean, other states, but here in Idaho too, just at the both state level and at more of the in the local level, a lot of places getting interested in how can we make sure broadband and internet access is available to everybody who wants it, because it really is becoming much more of a utility, um, and just a real expected thing. Like you brought up earlier, the census thing. The fact that the census is going to be online only, that they feel like, okay, it's we 2020 census, we can just handle that, and realizing, that there's a lot of hurdles still involved with that. There's
Right.
still a digital divide. So
Yeah, and that was another comment that comes to mind is like, if the government's going to require that we need to have internet and to be able to like basically interact with them
right.
the ways that they expect, and like they need to make sure we have access and at a like,
Hmm.
in an affordable way,
Right.
which, man, I kind of agree.
Yeah.
But
I,
I actually thought people, this may seem high to some people, but
right.
to me, I like what stood out to me from this chart is how many people said,
Hmm.
like, these people. I don't believe
Yeah.
that these people, because everybody that answered this survey said they use internet on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So no way is it just a little bit changing your life if you don't. It's gone now.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm right there with you. I think it. I think people were a little optimistic if they said only a little
yeah,
or a
they're
moderate
like,
amount. Yeah.
I think I sliced that maybe by age because my theory was like,
Hmm.
well, if you didn't have internet for a lot of your life, you're like, I could go back.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and still, it was like, we did see a little bit more like people that understated it a little bit. They said, yeah, it changed a lot, but like not the
Mhm.
biggest, not a great deal per se. That
Right.
has kind of a nice, pleasing for an analyst trend upwards as you get, as
Yeah.
if you're older, you're saying that in a higher percentage, but still, it's mostly a great deal.
Yeah. And I like that chart too, because you can also see people maybe. I mean, I see your chart over there on the far right for the people who answered a little. It was like, okay, people in 40. I mean, you got maybe a couple in the 10s and 20s, but mostly the 40s, 50s, and 60s were, those are the ones who said, oh, it's a little. Maybe again, not the digital natives, that
Right.
think, oh, we could go back to living
Yeah, I
without.
don't know what these 10s and 20s people are like, what
Yeah.
their lifestyle is, because it's not like the 10s and 20 people I know.
Right.
But yeah. Okay. Um, all right. This was,
Oh, that was a great question.
thanks. Yeah, like this
Yeah.
one really, I love hypotheticals. I think they're like really interesting how people say like, well, if this happened, then I would do that. If not, and the more ridiculous, the better.
Yes.
So this was, what would you give up before you give up internet? This is like not a real thing. Like, okay, like gun to your head, give up junk food, or I take your internet. But just kind of how people thought of it. Would you give up junk food before you give up internet? All the way down to, would you give up a marriage before you give up internet? And I wanted to have something kind of like, yeah, that's easy to give up, and something like really,
Wow.
really intense to give up, and see how people would respond.
Right.
Um, and we did have some people that would give up a marriage, by the way.
I did. I loved. I think my favorite little anecdote about that was more people willing to give up a marriage than a best friend, which made me wonder about the
Yeah.
quality of the marriage they were giving up.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe that marriage is already on its way out. So,
Right.
uh, yeah. what did you see in this?
I thought, yeah, that was a fascinating question. It was interesting, like you said, and your analysis, of piggybacking on, like you gave some people some easy answers, things that people already feel like they should give up, like junk food and drinking. So yeah, totally replace that with internet, you know, um, and things like an acquaintance. It's like, okay, if they're just an acquaintance, that's not a big deal. But then you feel like people get into harder choices, which I agree with your analysis that the local gathering one was pretty surprising there.
Yeah, that one was the standout to me.
That people would be, yeah, willing to give up that line. But I feel like digging into that one, there's some interesting ideas there, that, are people feeling a sense of community online? Does this speak a little bit to
Mhm.
the silos that we put ourselves in online, the bubbles that we're able to do with the Facebook algorithm and all that other stuff, that, that's more reinforcing than necessarily a local gathering where we're going to be confronted with differing viewpoints.
Right.
So are people finding a more reinforcing community by being online? Are we seeing, is this part of the trend of people the dying off of things like the bowling alone, where people are going to be separate, losing that kind of civic infrastructure of people being part of stuff, that they don't feel like it's that important anymore, or maybe just how people defined what a local gathering was too.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a lot to unpack in that one answer, and it did surprise me a little
Right. Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. Like the lack of, like, if we're shifting more to kind of digital
bit. Mm,
gatherings or digital communities,
right.
less about like kind of in-person communities, there's some downsides to that for sure.
Yeah.
Less, like you said, diversity of opinion or diversity of people.
Right.
And that can cause us to be reinforced in things that maybe shouldn't be reinforced if you were exposed to more things. But on there's a maybe a positive to it for some people. Like maybe you're not accepted as who you are where you live. Maybe I'll just
Absolutely.
maybe this is me generalizing too much, but like let's say you're a a gay high school kid in rural Idaho,
Yeah.
and it's very homophobic where you live,
Hmm.
and you can't come out, and there's nobody, and you're depressed, and you are struggling.
Yeah.
But now you have people that are just like you that can encourage you and be like, hang in there. You know, this helped
Yeah.
me. Maybe you should try this.
Yeah.
So then you've got somebody.
That's yeah, exactly. That's the positive angle of looking at it, is that, and then again, going back to the local gatherings thing, yeah, maybe the local gatherings in that hypothetical, are more negative. Maybe they're the ones that are like, you can't be yourself. You can't, I mean, foreshadowing ahead to one of your future the questions on this survey about expressing yourself, that really is a mechanism on the internet that people can express themselves in a lot of different ways. And maybe with a local gathering, it's like, you kind of got it, you have to fit yourself into the box, and if you're in a small community, you may
More
not
safe.
have the opportunity to
Yeah,
feel like you can. So yeah.
it's a great segue.
Yeah.
Keep going. What did like you're talking about expressing yourself? That was actually the least kind of prioritized
Right.
benefit.
Which was fascinating. I thought, like, I think you pulled out in your analysis as well about that I don't, maybe people didn't see the value in that enough, or maybe the people answering, but I and maybe it's just me, but I do think that is a huge benefit to the internet, is people being able to express, and maybe that's also carrying into the connecting with people,
Yeah,
connecting with people that you can express yourself with, that you can feel
yeah,
comfortable
those
with.
might be connected. Yeah,
Because I feel like, yeah, in especially rural or smaller areas, things where there's just not a lot of options, and you may feel pretty isolated and alone and cut off. Um, that really is one of the, I think, huge benefits of the internet, connecting people and
yeah,
letting people express who they feel like they truly are, with people that can relate to them. So
yeah.
that was great. I did love to see also, of course, being at the Commission for Libraries, the access to information people did value very highly.
Yeah, and to me that was almost like and it, I can't remember what I ranked, but that
Yeah,
probably was my top one too, because I feel like that's like the foundation of all these other ones.
Yep.
Like, it's like what makes all of this possible in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the building block to anything else, really. Access, providing the access.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I was glad to see that, and it was just it was neat to see how people different. But like you said, I think the expressing yourself one, it was interesting that did not show up a little higher there.
Yeah. Along those lines, I think probably
All right.
I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you thought this was interesting,
Yeah.
but how the folks that were in their 70s and 80s ranked it higher than, and that we only heard, I think, from like 10 people in that age range.
Yeah.
But it was noteworthy to me how much more they ranked expressing yourself,
Right.
given that I expected the opposite from them.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, Clint Eastwood, like stereotypes of old people, like, get off my lawn, or like
right.
all these young people expressing themselves. They think they're special snowflakes. They should get over themselves. They're not special. Like, that's what I expected to see more. And the fact that it was basically like, I care more about expressing myself compared to these other things than like everybody else does.
Yeah, I did agree. When I saw that breakdown in your analysis, like, wow, that's really interesting that it just, for that group, it was, for those people, it was just really an important thing to them.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, if there are any generalizations that can be drawn from that, just in terms of, as people get older in their life, maybe they have a little less mobility, maybe they have a little less ability to, physically get out and connect with people. So maybe being able to express themselves in a venue that is still available to them, maybe that makes a difference. Yeah.
And what just occurred to me is, like, maybe my generalization about the Clint Eastwood types is exactly the problem, and why they want to, like, why they care about expressing themselves, because like ageism is actually real. And maybe a lot of older folks really resent being lumped in with like a, overarching old person stereotype. So maybe that they feel like more of a need to kind of be like, I am me. I'm not just like this.
Right.
So yeah, along those lines, a little plug to this week's survey is it's about respect. And one of the questions is basically about like kind of respect for different types of groups. And one of the groups is like old people and young people. And the early data is showing that like definitely like people think old people are disrespected more than like young people, for instance. So anyway, that's going to be fun to look at too.
That will be an interesting comparison. Good connection there.
Yeah. Okay, so my main takeaway on the worst things ranking was that there wasn't a strong standout in the same way that there was with the benefits.
Yeah.
What did you think?
No, I agree. I think that was really interesting that people saw it was pretty equal. I think all the various options you put forth about what the worst things are, it was a good split, to segue a little to your analysis too, it was interesting. Again, like, I think you were totally spot on with the data security risks being, an upward trend with age. That totally makes sense to me. Just thinking about, back to the digital natives thing, or those who've grown up with it. I mean, I think the younger, people are used to not believing that any kind of security or privacy exists, that it's like it's inevitable. And I think, comparing that with, people who have not just, who have a longer who have had a longer lifespan and have seen, the eroding of it perhaps, rather than just being a part of it.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a neat trend to see.
Yeah. To me, like, it's extremely rare for me to see something that seems that correlated. And obviously I didn't do any like advanced statistical modeling on it, but just like just splitting it apart that way and seeing it look like that, it's like, Whoa. And this more or less is what I expected, but more than what I expected. Like I
Hmm.
thought maybe we'd see something like this just a bit, but not this
Yeah.
strongly. And it's just like, like
Yeah,
really, like each decade gets
it was
more and more
obvious.
concerned.
If I can point out too, the other thing on why you got that graph up is the less
Yeah.
offline one has a little bell curve shape to it, which I thought was really interesting.
Mm,
That the people who worry most about having people being less having less offline time is the people in that middle area. um, and I feel like
mm,
that kind of makes a little bit of sense too. I feel like people in their teens and 20s and 30s, they're the people who have the time for going and get together, hanging out. They've got close friend groups, they've got opportunities. And then
mm,
maybe even as you get older and you're the retiree, or you've got more opportunities to get together with your close friends and spend time. But I feel like those people in the 40s, 50s, I mean, they're already feeling maybe a time crunch, with career, family, all the other stuff. So anyway, I just thought that was a neat
it's
little belt.
already hard to come by, and now it's
Yeah, and they're
still.
feeling like the internet's competing with that. Um,
Yeah. It
so
also just occurred to me that these middle-aged folks
mhm,
um, are probably raising kids.
yeah,
Um, when the youngest aren't and maybe the oldest aren't either anymore. So,
right,
so this could be like them reflecting on themselves, like you just mentioned. It could also be
yeah,
them kind of reflecting more on their kids' upbringing and how this is,
yeah. That's a really good
fundamentally
insight.
different than them and maybe unhealthy.
Right. I think that's a really good insight too. That probably, and that might speak a little to the bullying one a little bit too, where you see
Mm,
the most prone for bullying, the teens and 20s. That totally makes sense. But then you think about the people that might be raising kids. I mean, it's kind of flattish there, but I wonder if you can draw anything similar to that as well,
mm,
potentially.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, really good point on that. I hadn't thought about the less offline thing. But
yeah. It was neat. I like how you pulled out some of those, and were able to make
those
more sense of
views,
them. Yeah.
yeah. Um, okay, this is
Mm,
kind of like we've covered a lot of ground. Like
yeah.
it's everything we've considered. Like, does the internet, is it a positive or kind of negative thing in your life?
Mm.
Um, and what do you read out of this?
Yeah, I think with the people that are saying they're on constantly, that are kind of these are the people that are already connected and stuff. I think it made sense to me that better and much better were very strong there. I think these are the people that are seeing the benefits of how the internet connects people and can bring them together and enable all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did think it was interesting, the people, the 11 folks there, I guess, who said worse, if they were, again, seeing some of the more negative aspects that the internet has given rise to. Um, but yeah, I guess it made sense to me that the better and much better on this survey were going to be well represented.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me that the way this data looks is like the it peaks on better instead of at much better and then kind of
Right.
gradually declines, because to me that seems like most people, they'd have some degree of hesitation, like
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
it is definitely a positive, like a clearly a positive thing for them, but they recognize the downsides and they're significant, so they don't want to put the maximum like positive answer.
Right.
um, it's
Yeah,
like a
and
little bit measured.
right. Yeah, I think people have, and maybe, that just seeing, the influence on, the polarization of society, the politics, that there's a lot, the digital divide, that I could see people, like you said, that it is interesting that people put more for better than much better, because maybe seeing some of the nuances, and it gave me, I mean, it makes a lot of sense in the sense it's a little bit more realistic. I think if everybody was saying much better, um, that doesn't really give us anywhere to go in terms of, but there's a
Yeah,
lot of things that still could be improved about the internet. There's still a lot
yeah,
of things that our society is figuring out.
yeah.
Um, regarding how to function
Right.
with the tool, this powerful tool that the internet gives us,
Yeah.
that can be used for good or evil, and sometimes
Yeah.
both, often
Yeah.
both.
Totally. Um, so we're about out of time. I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what are your, did this conversation or this,
Mhm.
the survey results, is there kind of anything sticking out to you on like you're leaving kind of with an impression or a conclusion or anything like that?
Yeah, I think overall, I was, and we going, I read through the comments people left of
Yeah.
what people were focusing on, and of course we don't have time to go through all those, but um, that there was it was neat to see people, I think, really identifying, again, what I feel pretty personally in both my role here, but also personally, that access to the internet, quality internet, is a real issue, for Idahoans. That being able to have affordable, high quality, the speed people want. All those things, for the internet, that is a challenge, and I think it really identified that in the comments, that people saw the real need. Even if they have access to it and if they're constantly using it, they could see the need for more of it. So
Yeah.
that I really took away from the comments as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the comments because I mean, the comments always like really leave an impression on me, but I thought, especially with me having such a limited,
mm,
uh, experience with what these, I have such a different experience than with the internet access than what a lot of Idaho has
yeah,
that it really kind of opened my eyes.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that was really neat. But just yeah, I think there was just, yeah, there was a lot of neat things within this survey that, I mean, the spread of age groups, how all of those people could see that the internet was important. Again, people seeing the internet overall as a something that makes society better, but
Hmm.
not without its downsides, that can be
Hmm.
addressed. Um, yeah, I think it was really just a good kind of general overview for, how important, improving access to the internet, and making people aware of, how privileged some of us may be with the access we have, and wherever we live in the state, that others may not have that ability, but that it really, can make, I think, a huge difference, for people's
Yep.
opportunities, their ability to connect with other people, that maybe don't live in their small rural community, to feel accepted, or just access to information and education, opportunities that are not available. Um,
Totally.
so
Privilege
yeah,
is a good word for that. And some of the comments that I intentionally included were some people that didn't understand that. They
yeah,
thought that like people don't have internet at this point. That's their bad. Like,
right,
so I was like, not everybody has this perspective.
yeah,
Um,
and exactly, and I feel like that's where there's work still to be done, is to to really, inform people, the challenges, throughout the state of providing people with internet access, and
so,
to plug myself, for the role of the libraries too, to be able to serve as a gateway, a conduit to both bringing internet access into a community, but also connecting people to the internet, if they don't want to or can't afford, being able to connect themselves.
yep, yep,
So I
totally. Yeah.
really appreciate the opportunity, Cam. I think this was a great
Oh, thanks.
survey.
Well, thanks for partnering with me. And yeah, with libraries in general, helping people access information, and you helping libraries figure out this internet access thing. As a digital native, you're doing God's work. So thanks for doing that. Yeah, and I
That,
think we're out of time.
yeah,
Um, thanks again, and yeah, hopefully we can do something like this again.
I look forward to it. Yeah, and I just wanted to comment. I really appreciated your T-shirt you're wearing today, because that speaks to the library heart inside me as well. That data is very important.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well,
Great.
you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you later.
You too. Thank you,
I'm going to
Cam.
follow you on Twitter.
Thank you.
Yep. See ya.